So let me see if I got this straight. You want to learn how to play this game? This game? Well, you've come to the right place. Before that though, come hang out on twitch.tv/EnjuryTV. I stream Hearts of Iron 4 quite frequently, and I host open multiplayer games where anyone can join, no matter what experience you have in the game. I would also really appreciate it if you guys showed me some love by pressing the like button and subscribing to my channel. It means a whole lot to a small content creator like me when I spent a good 6 or 7 hours editing this full video together on top of recording it. And of course, if anything was unclear in the tutorial or if I missed any topics that you're curious about, post your questions down below. I answer absolutely all of them, just like I did back in the old Hearts of Iron 3 video. Before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of playing Hearts of Iron 4, I want to talk briefly about buying Hearts of Iron 4. And what I want to emphasize here is that you should look for this game wherever you can get it the cheapest, which will typically be third-party key retailers, be it G2A, All Key Shop, whatever you like to use. Just go ahead and look for the game where it's the cheapest. Please do not buy it for the full retail price on Steam, which is $30 by default. And be mindful of the DLC in Hearts of Iron 4. Not all the DLC is good. Paradox Interactive, the developers of Hearts of Iron 4, are quite notorious for making, let me be blunt and say, shitty DLC. And the most recent DLC have been shit as well. So be mindful, do not buy the DLC blindly, figure out what you want with it, and go on from there. Now that we've talked about buying Hearts of Iron 4 and its DLC, it's only natural to talk about the mods for Hearts of Iron 4. This is where 99% of the content in Hearts of Iron 4 is, and to be quite frank, if you're not playing with mods, you're doing it wrong. You can get any mod that you want. If you want huge anime titties, you can get it. If you want a realistic experience like Black Ice from Hearts of Iron 3, you can get it. If you want alternative history, there's so much alternative history, you can't get enough of it. If you want Fallout 4, here's Fallout 4, Old World Blues, highly recommended, one of my favorite mods. Please play with mods. It's where most of the content in the game actually is. The stock game is not worth it unless you're looking for achievement hunting, basically. Okay, we're just about ready to start playing some Hearts of Iron 4. Last thing we have to talk about is this stupid, useless window that you're looking at right now. This is the Paradox Interactive Uniform Launcher. This is a launcher that is present in pretty much all Paradox Interactive games, be it Crusader Kings 2, Europa Universalis, or in our case, Hearts of Iron 4. This launcher is very slow, it's very glitchy, and very laggy. I'm having trouble with my playsets button just disappearing, and it won't appear until I restart the whole launcher. I'm having it take a solid 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes up to 5 minutes, to completely actually load in. It's a real pain in the ass, this whole launcher. It's quite a joke. Anyways, in the playsets menu here, this is where you find all your mods, which you're hopefully playing with. If not, what are you doing? Go to the Steam Workshop and find some mods. Look at the most subscribed ones, for example. They're all pretty good. Play with mods, please, for the love of God. Mind you, you can't, certain mods don't work together. For example, total overhaul mods will not work together. Like, let's say, let me find one here. Black Ice will not work with Cold War Iron Curtain. You have to figure out the logic of what works together and what doesn't. Usually, things that change the status of the game will not work together, so you could combine 2 times National Focus, which will speed up the focus process, with, for example, Black Ice, but combining 50 construction slots will probably not work with Black Ice because of the way it modifies the game. Anyhow, I think with that being said, I've covered this launcher. I don't want to look at this stupid thing ever again, and let's go ahead and actually start playing some Hearts of Iron 4. Now that we've finally started Hearts of Iron 4, the first thing you're going to want to do is go into the options menu, click audio, and turn off the music volume. Because after playing Hearts of Iron 4 for almost 1,000 hours, I'd rather shoot myself in the head with a sawed-off shotgun than listen to the stock 20 songs ever again. Okay, jokes aside, welcome to Hearts of Iron 4. I'll be your guide, Injury. Let's go ahead and click single player. Let's make a new game. Ignore the tutorial, that's what you're here for. And I highly recommend you start your first game in 1936. That gives you the most playtime. And this menu is kind of stupid. Go in and click other countries to get the traditional full map that we want to see, similar to Hearts of Iron 4. Now, If you haven't watched my Hearts of Iron 3 tutorial, however, highly recommend it. It's very funny. Moving on. For your first playthrough, I'd recommend you play a medium-sized country, as I do in Hearts of Iron 3, but you're more than welcome to choose pretty much whatever you want. Hearts of Iron 4 is a much easier game to play and manage than Hearts of Iron 3, and if you're coming from other Paradox games like Crusader Kings 2, EU4, and all the other ones, learning Hearts of Iron 4 is going to be a lot easier than learning Hearts of Iron 3. That's kind of a uniform message throughout this tutorial series. This isn't that hard of a game. You'll learn this quite fast. Don't feel too down if this is all a little bit foreign to you in the first couple minutes. You'll learn it really quick, and it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of players you can play with. Me, for example, if you want to join us on Twitch, you're more than welcome to. I'd love to teach you guys this stuff live, so go ahead and join us if you want. Anyway, so this is your basic menu. You got some custom game rules here. This will let you tweak and tune. This window will let you tweak and tune whatever you want. If you want to play with a stronger Germany, a weaker Italy, whatever it is, you can do pretty crazy things here. You can split countries. You can decolonize. You can do that. Anyways, not a whole lot of other things you can do here. You can change your difficulty, and you can choose to play with or without Iron Man mode. Iron Man mode lets you unlock achievements on Steam, so if that's what you're here for, you have to enable that to play with Iron Man mode, or didn't get achievements. Iron Man mode is, long story short, basically just a save so that you can't load back. You can't manually save, nor can you manually load back if things don't go your way. Historical AI focuses is exactly what you think it is. It'll just tweak the AI to try and do things a little bit more historically. Now, as I mentioned in the start, I recommend you choose a medium-sized country and someone that has a focus tree. We haven't talked about focus tree yet. I'm going to show you guys what that is. It's one of the very core elements of what Hearts of Iron 4 truly is. So I think for our first playthrough here, we're going to play as Romania, just because they have an interesting focus tree, and there's a lot of things you can do as Romania. So I think with that being said, let's just kind of go ahead and jump into it. Okay, so we're finally actually in the game, ready to play. Now, the first thing you're probably noticing is that my game might not look exactly like yours. The reason for that being is that if you go into your game options here and you click on game, I believe. Yep, you click on game, and you can choose to play with or without NATO symbols. I highly recommend that you do play with NATO symbols. It'll make things a lot easier for you. Some people love it, some hate it. I'm of the old school kind of Hearts of Iron fan. I play Hearts of Iron 3 in older games, so I'm really used to playing with these NATO counters. What these really mean, without super getting in too deep into it, because a lot of people don't care about it, is these boxes here essentially mean different kinds of units. This little box with a cross is an infantry unit, for example. This cross right here is a cavalry. Learning these by heart makes playing Hearts of Iron 4 a lot easier, because if you're playing without them, you'll basically be more or less down. It'll be down to guessing whether or not what kind of unit you're looking at. So I can tell this is a helmet and this is a horse, but you can change those icons pretty much at your own will. So I recommend you play with NATO counters and learn them by heart. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover. Go ahead and use the timestamps down below if you want to skip to certain topics. I'll have them all linked down there. The first thing I want to talk about is national focuses and focus trees. I talked about it before, and you might be a little bit confused as to what that basically is. A focus tree is pretty much just a bunch of things that you can do as a country to steer your country in different directions. So, for example, if we're looking at Romania here, I can go ahead and start this national focus here, which will, for example, it'll give me more political power, which is one of our resource types that you can see up here. And then later down the line, I can, by my focus tree, choose what happens with my country. For example, if I want to go for a royalist type government, I can choose that in my focus tree here. If I want to go for a communist government, I can go ahead and do that. This is basically what your focus tree does. It'll let you do a whole bunch of things. It'll let you get war goals. Your focus tree more or less steers what happens in the game, and not just for you, but all the other players as well. Every single country in Hearts of Iron 4 has a focus tree. It might not be a unique focus tree, but it will be there. Every country has a focus tree either way. A country like, let's say, I think Albania might not have a focus tree since they're quite small. This is what the vanilla focus tree looks like. If we look at another country without a focus tree, such as Norway, you'll see that they have the same focus tree. Germany, on the other hand, will have a radically different focus tree. And the focus tree is a very important thing to know what is, because you can track what other countries are doing by looking at their focus tree. For example, the Soviet Union in their focus tree at some point can choose to invade Romania. And it's quite important to me as Romania that I know that they're not going to invade me anytime soon. Okay, so you now know what a focus tree basically is. I briefly touched on political power. Political power, as I mentioned, is one of the resources in Hearts of Iron 4. Political power is gained every day, and you can spend political power on your national focuses. That'll drain a certain amount of political power every single day. So if we start this one, for example, you can see it says daily political power cost +1. So if I start this, I'll have a little bit less political power every day. With your political power, you can also change your laws and other things. Everything is accessed via clicking your flag and clicking the different buttons down here. Everything from your mobilization laws, which will change how many of your factories can be used for military purposes, to adding political advisors that might help your country switch policies, for example, going from a democracy to a fascist state, or adding military generals that can give you bonuses in your units. All of that comes from your political power. Political power may also give you higher stability. So we've now touched briefly on one of the very basic resource types in Hearts of Iron 4. We're going to move along the status bar here and talk about what these different things are, so stay tuned. Next up is your stability. Your stability is pretty much the people's support for the current government, as the description says. The stability, however, also says something about how much political power you have, how much or how effective your factories are, amongst other things. Next up is your war support. Every country will need a certain amount of war support to go to war, and your war support will also affect your units on the ground, such as if you're fighting an offensive war, your war support will drastically lower. If you're fighting a defensive war, or a defensive war rather, your war support will drastically increase and your units will perform better in combat. Next up is your manpower. Your manpower is pretty self-explanatory. This is how many men you have, or men and women, you have available to draft into your armed forces. These will either be used for creating new units or resupplying the ones you already have. Your manpower is directly affected by, amongst other things, your type of draft laws, which in Romania's case here is volunteer only. The stricter the draft laws you have, other things will also be affected, such in this case, if you have service by requirement, your construction speed, factory output, dockyard output, and training time will be increased. Moving on from the manpower, we have factories. In Hearts of Iron 4, there are two factory types that you need to be extremely aware of. You have civilian factories, and you have military factories. Both of these factory types have a very, very specific use. Civilian factories are used for two different things. Civilian factories can be traded away for resources. Pretty much you'll give them away in favor of a resource, and they can also be used for construction. We'll look at the construction tab and these tabs here a little bit earlier, along with these little notification boxes as well. Military factories are used to produce guns, tanks, equipment, and pretty much everything that your army and country needs to survive, including heavy machinery and artillery pieces. So I was editing this video together when I realized I had lied in the previous sentence here. There are actually 3 factory types altogether. I talked about 2 of them, the civilian factories and the military factories. Those are as described. But there is a 3rd factory type, which are your naval dockyards, which are obviously used to produce ships. They just kind of skipped my mind when I was making the tutorial. They're not used for trading or anything like that, but they can only be used for making ships. The next resource type we need to look at is your fuel, and your fuel is pretty self-explanatory. It's your fuel. It's used by all units that use tanks, for example, that are mechanized. Your Air Force and your Navy will all drain fuel every single day, depending on how much they move and depending on how many units you have. Every country has a certain amount of fuel, and it is gained by processing oil into fuel via refineries. If you want to see how much fuel you have, or how much oil you have rather, or which countries have oil, if you look down on the right side of the screen, you'll see a resource map mode selection screen. For example, in our case, I'm going to select resource map mode, and you can see that Romania has 70 oil available, which is quite a lot, and you can see all the other different types of resources here. These are very, very important to keep an eye on, as, for example, if you need a certain resource, you might want to go after a certain country. Like, let's say that you're Germany and you need access to a lot of fuel or oil, Romania might be a viable target. Moving on from your fuel, we have convoys. Convoys in Hearts of Iron 4 are used for trading. That could also include, as you can see it says, naval invasion battle plans, transferring troops, and for trade and supply. If you're playing multiplayer and someone wants to send you guns and you don't have a land route to them, they could send you guns via convoys. That means that you, as the receiver, needs to have enough convoys to actually receive those guns. Convoys can be produced in the production screen. I'll show you how this works a little later. Long story short, all you have to do is press build ships and select convoys. Moving on from the convoys, we have command power. Command power in Hearts of Iron 4 is a unique resource that is used, amongst other things, for promoting generals. You can use your command power to pretty much let your generals use unique powers, such as a last stand power, which might give you more defense, and different kinds of things. Right after your command power is your army experience, your navy experience, and finally your air experience. These 3 stars are these resource types are more or less just used for changing your division templates. I'll go more into details on how those work. For example, if I want to make an upgrade to one of my ship types, I'll need to use naval experience to alter it. Let's say that I want to add artillery to my infantry division here, which it already has, but let's say I wanted to add support anti-air. You can see it'll cost me 10 army experience. Army experience is gained, amongst other things, by doing exercises, which I'll also show you how it works a little later in the video. And you can also gain it by having, for example, a chief of staff that might grant you a little bit of army experience, or by having a political advisor. So now that we've been through the different resource types and the different statuses, let's go ahead and start talking about some of these different tabs that we have here. On the left, we have your events and your decisions. You can spend political power, as I mentioned before, when your resources on different kinds of events. You can hold national decisions, you can ban communism, you can institute press censorship, all kinds of different events. You can initiate war propaganda, which might increase your war support but decrease your stability. A lot of different things you can do here in the Events and Decisions tab. I highly recommend you turn off the notifications so it's not going to be glaring in your face continuously, but as things progress, you might get more and more events and decisions. Okay, so I'd actually finished out the entire tutorial, but I wasn't satisfied with the technology part of the tutorial, so we're going to go back and talk about it. Sorry for the game state kind of jumping back and forth. We're now kind of after the tutorial originally finished, so this is what the world kind of looks like now, although the Soviets haven't surrendered here for some reason, but whatever. After your Decisions tab is your research and your research tree. And your research tree is where you're going to spend a whole lot of your time. This is a very, very, very important part of the game. So in here you can find just about everything. You can find your infantry technology, your support companies, the armor, tanks, artillery, land doctrines. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about land doctrines, naval doctrines, and so forth. One of the very, very important tabs is your engineering tab and your industry tab. So this is where you find a lot of the tech for your entire country. This is actually where you find all the tech for your entire country. And what I want to emphasize here is the fact that you can't research everything. You're going to have to make some decisions on what you're going to ignore and what you're going to spend a lot of time on. If you're a country that has a massive industry, we haven't talked about that yet, but let's say you have a lot of factories, maybe it'll be viable to push hard for some mechanized troops, because mechanized troops are very effective. They are a lot more armored than just having troops out with guns. But if you don't have that, let's say you're a smaller country, maybe you're running a defensive war, maybe just pushing for some support weapons, getting the best land doctrines you can get, focusing on the superior firepower doctrine or something like that to try and defend as best as you possibly can. That might be the way to go for you. So I want to make it clear that you can't research everything. Right now the game state is the 1st of January 1941. Germany is kicking the Soviets' ass, but as Romania, for example, I have to make some decisions. I haven't gone full in on tactical bombers, for example, because I can't make fighters and bombers very well at the same time. I just don't have the industry for it. Same goes for engineering. I'm not going to bother researching atomic stuff because we're never going to get to that stage in this little game we're doing now. And for me, it's going to be a waste of production ability, really. But let's go ahead and go through all these tabs. So on the far left here, we have our infantry tab. This is where you find your guns, your different kinds of infantry types. Marines are used for naval invasions, paratroopers for paradroppings, obviously. Mountain infantry is very good for fighting in the hills. You can increase your special forces cap down here, and so forth and so forth. The thing with researching is that sometimes you'll get a message like this when it says, technology is ahead of time, and it's 1 year ahead of time. Whether or not it's going to be worth researching something that is so drastically ahead of time, like let's go ahead and say night vision. It's going to take me 500 days to research it because it's 2 years ahead of time. That's going to be an option you're going to have to make. One thing you'll take note of is the fact that different countries have different amount of research slots. Depending on what country you're playing and where you are in your focus tree, you might get some more ones. So for Romania right here, you can see that I've done this national focus right here, and it does say effect gain 1 research slot. So depending on how many slots you have and what technology you're missing, it may or may not be worth researching something that is really far ahead of time. As a medium-sized country such as myself, I don't see the point in spending a lot of time researching something that is so far ahead when we're behind on other things. Like maybe I should get paratroopers instead, or maybe I should just focus on getting some basic naval technology done, because I have, in this game so far, I've completely skipped on naval tech pretty much altogether, although we have a small navy at this point. After your infantry tab here, you have your support companies. We haven't gone ahead and talked about how divisions work yet, but your support companies are, if I skip to the recruit tab here for a second, your support companies is this little column here on the left, and they're essentially smaller companies that support your troops in battle. They can be anything from military police, like you see here, support anti-air, support anti-tank, field hospitals, all that kind of stuff is researched in this support companies tab. A great one would be if you're a small country, for example, like let's say you're Norway, it might be worth investing in a field hospital, because if you click on this, you can see it says trickle back and experience loss is -10. That means that not as many troops will die and your manpower shortages will be smaller. So choosing the right support companies is pretty important to you, and it's going to change from unit to unit, because you can have a lot of different division types. and it's going to be changing based on what country you're playing as well, like I just said. For example, if you have a tank unit, a tank division, a maintenance company might be a good idea. But these divisions or these support companies, they do also change the stats of your units. We haven't gotten into it yet. I'll get back to it, but it does also cost a little bit to make these support companies. Not a whole lot, often in terms of manpower. You can see they're usually, I mean, look at the 500. I think they're all 500. Do they increase in size when you upgrade them? They don't. So the stock size is 500, so they're quite small, but they will in some cases be very useful. So engineer companies, very, very useful. They increase your defense. You can see it actually reduces your soft attack, but it does help in other instances, like they help your entrenchment, so you can dig in better and defend better, essentially. The same thing can be said for your signal companies. Makes comms better. Initiative is increased by 20%. That's quite a lot. But support companies require, as you can see by just by hovering my mouse over it, it will say that I need radios to be able to research this. And that's kind of a message throughout this whole technology tree, is that a lot of the tech will require something else. Like, let's say I want to make, God, what do I want to make? Let's say I want to make I can research a certain hull, so I can make this cruiser type hull, but when I'm trying to build it, it will require me to have some guns, and you'll have to research the guns as well. Nevertheless, right after your support companies, you've got your armor. This is where you research different kinds of tanks. Do take note, of how the different research directions here work. So you could go for a heavy tank, and then you can skip directly down to a heavy in 1941, and then you would also be able to research the medium of 41, and that kind of progresses down this way. Over here you got your amphibious tanks and so forth. Every country will have different tanks, so for Romania I've got some unique ones. If you're playing a country that doesn't have unique tanks, you'll have some more basic ones. Germany obviously has a whole different tank section of their own, and that goes for a lot of the tech. They'll have different ships, they might have different guns in this infantry menu here, although they will have the same stats, they'll look a little bit different. After your tanks, you've got your artillery. Again, the same principle can be said. The further down you go here, the better it gets. So you can see that also by hovering your mouse over it. The more modern it is, the better it is. You've also got rocket artillery. It's a different type of artillery. Better and worse in some cases, but it is a different type. After that, you've got your land doctrines. And a lot of the Hearts of Iron players out there talk a lot about the land doctrines, but what's important to know is that you need to choose your land doctrine based on what country you're playing, what country you're going to want to be leading, and what kind of army you have now, and what kind of army you will have later in the game. So if you're a country that has a lot of mechanized units, infantry, tanks, and so forth, go for mobile warfare. That'll be your doctrine of choice. If you have tons and tons and tons of manpower and ludicrous amounts of factories, and you can just throw people on the front lines until there's just a bloody mess left, maybe go for mass assault. Those two are only really useful in specific cases. Like I mentioned, the center here is where most countries are going to be playing. Superior firepower is, I feel personally, always a safe pick. As the doctrine description says, this doctrine focuses on throwing shells, not enemies, or not what? This doctrine focuses on throwing shells, not men, at the enemy. Our manpower is precious, bullets are cheap. It's a pretty safe choice. You've also got Grand Battle Plan, which means extensive planning and preparation before engaging in battle is the key to success. Useful in some cases, not useful in others. I don't like to use it personally because I'm not the one that always plan out my battles way ahead of time. But it is a pretty safe choice as well. It is similar to the superior firepower. They are very, very similar. But again, if you want more details on what to pick, what not to pick, I recommend you look up a guide very specifically just for land doctrines. I think going any deeper into it than what we've already said now would be a waste of time. We've got a lot of things to cover, but choose the doctrine that you want and the one that makes sense for your country. Like I said, mobile for Germany, mass assault for China and the Soviet Union and countries with a lot of manpower, superior firepower and grand battle plan for most other countries. Next to that, you've got your Naval Technology tab. This is where you can research different hulls, and like I said before, it's very important that you have to realize that you need to also research guns. It doesn't help very much to have the best heavy ship hull and then you have no guns. A ship needs guns, right? So make sure you also research guns. Don't forget to do that. That'll be very embarrassing. Also make sure that if you're focusing on submarines, you researched better torpedoes and so forth. What you need to know as well is that making these large ships is very, very expensive and incredibly slow. We haven't gotten to the part where we talk about making ships yet in practice, but I want to show it really fast so you have an idea of how slow it actually is. So if you're making a ship type that is very light, like Convoys, you can see that I can assign a lot of factories here. I can assign, what is this, up to 15 factories, all in all. However, if I try to make a heavier ship, let's take the heaviest one I can make. In my instance, I think it might just be the destroyer. You can see I can only assign 10. And for heavy battleships, you can only assign 5. So the production process is going to be very, very slow. So you need to consider whether or not it's worth researching those massive battleships on their own. Because you may or may not know this, but battleships they're not really effective on their own. They need support. They need destroyers, cruisers, submarines. So pick and choose your ship types depending on what country you have. In some cases, you might not even have a navy. If you're a landlocked nation, then you might want to skip this altogether. But be a little bit smart in what you research here. Don't spend a whole lot of time on the most expensive stuff that you can never get. Get something that's simple, that'll work for your country, and work with the factories that you have. Also, make sure to research transport ships. I'd actually forgotten to do that in this tutorial as well a little bit later when I show you naval invasions. That's down here. You need to research that for naval invasions. Submarines are very effective if you have limited production capabilities and you're a small country. You can do some damage with submarines, doing convoy raiding and that kind of stuff, denying your enemy supplies. Very, very effective to have submarines, and they're pretty cheap to both run in terms of manpower and to make, like I said. So this is where that happens. After that, you've got all of your naval doctrines, and there are 3 doctrine tabs altogether: your land, your naval, and your air doctrines. And the same thing that I said for the land doctrines can be said for your naval doctrines. Choose the naval doctrine best that is suited to your country. If you're going to be running a lot of submarines, don't pick fleet and being. Again, the description here is self-explanatory. It says, a strong fleet focused around battleships mean that we are a force to be reckoned with when deployed at sea. That's going to be a bad doctrine to choose if you're going to be running submarines only, right? You can see that by the effects it grants us. For Romania, I've already chosen trade interdiction. This gives me submarine organization, light cruisers, and heavy cruisers. That's where I'm going to be focusing my naval capabilities on. That's what I'm going to be focusing on, having some of those ship classes. I'm never going to be making a battleship. It's too expensive, it's going to cost me too much, and it's not going to be worth it because most of the stuff that I'm doing right now is based around land combat anyways. You've also got base strikes, again, focused on carriers, also completely irrelevant for me. These two here, I might as well just ignore them. I'd go for a trade interdiction right away. But again, like I've said before, spend time researching what you actually need. You can't get it all. You have to pick and choose a little bit depending on what country you're playing, depending on what you want as well. Next up, you've got your air. Same thing here can be said. You can't have it all, so try and focus on what you want. Bombers are good for, well, bombing, and fighters are good for fighting. Bombers cannot really operate too well on their own. They need fighters alongside them to do very well. Fighters will do limited damage on the ground, but will be able to control the air, and that will give you a really good bonus. So if you're a country like Romania that doesn't have masses and masses of factories, maybe just going for some simple fighters like I have down here. I did actually research CAS and naval bombers. I think depending on what your country you're playing, some things might be unlocked by default. That you have to take note of that. Like if you're playing Germany, you might start off with like mediums. I don't think you do actually, but depending on what country you have, you're going to have different tech. It's going to look a little bit different for each country, not vastly though. So I've got basic fighters here that I'm producing to try and get some aerial supremacy where I can, or air superiority, whatever. And you've got your air doctrine as well. Again, like I've said, pick the one that suits their country the best. If you're going to make a lot of bombers, go for strategic destruction. If you have a lot of bombers, this is the doctrine for you. If not, maybe battlefield support with CAS. You've got operational integrity, which is focused around tactical bombers. Flexible, it can perform both ground support and regular bombing. That's like a mix, and this is pretty much just for fighters. That's what I'm going to be doing here. Or CAS. Fighters and CAS is this center doctrine here. Next is your engineering tab. These two final tabs here are extremely important, maybe more so than the air doctrines, the naval altogether. These 4 tabs here, the naval and the air, I mean, they're important, but engineering and industry is probably the most important ones combined with infantry. This is where you find your radio tech. This is where you get radio towers, radars. This is where you get more research speed. You can encrypt and decrypt better so you can find out what your enemies are doing. Like right now, if I want to know what the Soviets are up to, for example, okay, they don't have that high decryption yet, but if a country has high encryption, that means that you'll need to have high decryption to see what they're doing. So researching the right things here in the engineering tree as well, very important. Pick and choose what you want. I'm skipping completely on atomic energy and stuff like that. It's just not feasible for Romania to research it. And with the way the world's going as well, I'm going to ignore it altogether. You do rocket its experiments over here. This all down here just gives you more research speed. Very useful, but again, I'm picking and choosing a little bit, and I've kind of ignored doing encryption and decryption for now. Here's the industry tab. Also very important. What you do here is you choose what kind of industry you want to be doing. You can choose dispersed or concentrated. If you're, for example, scared of your country being annexed or partially occupied, maybe go dispersed. That will spread out your industry a little bit more and give you a little bit less vulnerability to bombing and that kind of thing. Concentrated gives you more efficiency, but again, it concentrates your industry in central spots, and that might fuck you over pretty bad if you've concentrated your industry in some places. Your machining tools in this part over here are very important. That'll increase your production efficiency, which essentially is how high the efficiency can become when a certain factory is producing something. So you see, we haven't talked about the production tab yet, but we'll come back to it. But what I want to show you right now is if you hover your mouse over this little red bar here, or this bar, it'll say the efficiency cap is 80%, and the higher it is, the more effective they are. And it takes a factory a little while. Like, let's say this factory here, this little green one, is now making motorized. If I was to disable that and put it on to making infantry equipment, it's going to take a while before that factory can become efficient at making guns. It makes sense, right? If you're making cars and suddenly you're making guns, it'll take you a while before you can get good at that, right? So having the right tools for the job, the machining tools is going to help you out getting your factories to be more efficient as well. Over here in this construction tab, you'll be able to build things faster. Resource gain efficiency will just give you more resources out of the ones you already have. You've got your oil over here, which I'm playing Romania, so I've done kind of a bad job with this. I've talked about the fuel resource, and what I want to make sure you guys know is that your fuel will over time slowly either gain or drain depending on what you're doing. So for me right now, I'm playing as Romania. I'm not moving my troops around, so my fuel is gaining, and after a while it's going to be full, and you don't have anywhere else to store your fuel, so it's going to be a waste. So make sure you try and build some fuel storage, and having the fuel storage is unlocked over here in the fuel storage. You can see it says effect enables building fuel silo state level 3. That is unlocked in your construction tab. We're going to look at that a little bit later. So that's basically your tech tree. Key notes to take note of, I guess, is you can't have it all. Pick and choose. Realize what country you're playing and realize how you're going to develop your country. Make a battle plan of some sort. If you're going to go full in on infantry, pick things that's going to help your infantry out. If you want a lot of fighters, pick stuff that'll help you with fighters. And then have all the base things as well, like engineering and industry, always very, very important. Try to unlock as many research slots as you can with your country. It is a little bit unfair sometimes because different countries will get different things or get more research slots than others, but it is a pretty fine balance. But that's just kind of how Hearts of Iron is. Sorry for the jumping back and forth this early in the tutorial. You guys can see how the game state has evolved. We're now going to go back to the original part of the tutorial, which is now kind of back in time because I recorded this afterwards. But let's go ahead and move on to the other tabs here. Next up, anyways, is your diplomacy tab, or diplomacy. Is it diplomacy or diplomacy? I don't This is where you can see how much other countries like or dislike you. I don't personally spend a lot of time here, and you probably won't neither. Next up is your trade tab. Your trade tab is very important to see how much you're missing of a certain resource. In my case, I'm missing on all 11 steel because I need 13 and I'm exporting 2, and that means I'm left with a negative of 13, or rather deficit of 13. You can also see what countries have a lot of different resource types. So in my case, I can see that if I wanted to buy some steel, I might want to do it from the United States because they have a lot of it, and they'll probably take some civilian factories in return. Another thing to keep an eye on is that sometimes there'll be countries that you can't actually trade with. For example, in this case, Bolivia is producing steel, but no possible trade route can be found, as it is probably too far away or it is a landlocked country. Trading in Hearts of Iron 4 is pretty much wholly automatic in comparison to Hearts of Iron 3. If you're lacking a resource type, you can buy it by using your civilian factories. So in my case, if I want to buy steel, I'll just click the flag of the United States here, or just click it all together. A little box will pop up, which will let me know that if I want to buy a certain amount, I'll need to trade a certain amount of civilian factories. And again, like I mentioned, civilian factories are used for construction, so buying this will also decrease the speed of production of, for example, other factories. I'll also need a certain amount of convoys to ship this back and forth, and my convoys can also be raided by hostiles if I'm at war. So if I go ahead and click send now, you can see that my convoy count and my factories count have both dropped as I'm sending convoys to the United States. In this case, you can see I don't even have enough convoys to get all the steel that I need for my production lines. Your supply and demand will continuously change based on what you're making. We haven't looked at the production tab yet, but if I'm making tanks, I might need tungsten, and if I'm making ships, I might need more steel, for example. So depending on what you produce, you're going to want to go into this trade tab every once in a while and make sure that you're not sitting on a boatload of, let's say, steel, in which case you could click the button here to halt all trade, and you can actually get some better deals if you make sure that you're running the right amounts, so to say. The next tab to look at is your construction tab, and your construction tab is pretty much just that. It's your construction tab. Up in the left corner, you can see that this is how many civilian factories you have available for construction. Like I mentioned before, we've traded some of our factories away. So you can see 5 are used for consumer goods, and consumer goods is a law that we looked at briefly before. So if I want to have more civilian factories available for military industrial use, I'll have to change my laws here. Other than that, we're also trading some away, and we're getting a couple from imports as well. So by using civilian factories, I can, like I mentioned before, build more civilian factories, which will increase how much I can trade, and it will also increase how fast I can repair roads and similar things like that. In my case, or in general, I highly recommend that you, as a new player, spend the early years of the game building as many civilian factories as possible, because you're going to need it for trade, or you're going to need it to build other facilities. So in my case, I'm going to choose civilian factory, and I'm going to choose a region that has enough building slots and a certain amount of infrastructure on top of not being too vulnerable to the enemy. So in my case, we know that the Soviet Union is, let's say, interested in this region over here, so I'm not going to build any factories there. And we can see the infrastructure over here is not all that great, but it's central in the country, so I know it's probably not going to be stolen from me anytime soon. So I'm going to spend my civilian factories building things here. You can see I've queued this construction. If you hover your mouse over the little line here, it'll say it should be complete by the 29th of April, 1937. If I get more factories to build this, the production speed will obviously increase as well. In the left pane here, like you've already seen, you can build different things. Naval dockyards can only be built on a naval state. You can build different things that we don't have the technology for, like nuclear reactors. You can build land forts. I highly recommend that you generally don't build any of the fort types because they're not actually that useful. Having a military force or spending your factories on other things is, generally speaking, a lot more effective than building forts. You can also build air bases and that kind of thing in this menu. Next up is the production tab. This is also one of the very, very important tabs in Hearts of Iron 4. You'll be spending a lot of time staring at this tab. The most important thing you need to look at right now is just what you're building and how many factories you have assigned to each factory line. So in my case, infantry equipment up here, my rifles, I've got 2 factories aligned, and we have a need of 400 additional rifles, almost 500, excuse me. Which means that we should assign more factories to producing these kinds of rifles. So let's go ahead and do that by just clicking here. We'll automatically add as many factories as I can. If I fill it out max, you can see I only have a certain amount of factories available, so that if more are available now, they'll automatically be queued for producing more rifles. I generally don't find that to be very useful, so I'm just going to do that. We haven't looked at notifications yet, but they will change. Of course, we saw that the available factory sign just disappeared. If I do this, it will reappear. Another important thing to notice in this production menu is, as I mentioned before, what you're actually consuming by building something. So these rifles or this production line will require 2 units of steel. Support equipment will need 1 unit of aluminium. Artillery will typically need tungsten, and so forth and so forth. The little buttons up top here will let you produce different kinds of things, like different equipment types, heavy vehicles, tanks has its own little menu, aircraft has its own menu. You can also click this button out here to produce different variants with weaponry and all this kind of stuff, and spend Army and Navy experience like we talked about as well. And finally, you can also build ships. Now, one important thing to notice when building ships is that the larger the ship type you're building, the less naval factories can be assigned to it. So you can see that already here I have a submarine hull queued for production by default in the start of the game, and I cannot queue more than 10 factories or 10 naval dockyards for producing submarine hulls. This is a balancing thing that they added a couple of years ago. I think that was man the guns. But you can also see that in Convoys, I can queue as many production lines as I want, or as many naval dockyards as I want. Battleships can only generally take 5, and that will obviously affect how quickly you can build those kinds of ships. Finally, another thing you should notice by just sitting in this production tab is this little green line here. I talked briefly before about production efficiency and production efficiency caps. Your cap is how high your efficiency can reach, and your current production efficiency is just that. It is your current production efficiency. If I was, for example, to stop making this tank, and I want to spend that factory on making rifles instead, it's going to take that factory a little bit of time before it can actually produce rifles efficiently. Let's go ahead and put it on another research or another production type instead. Like, let's say this. And obviously, based on what kind of technology you have, what kind of tools you have, your efficiency can become higher, and it will also take the factories some conversion time between switching lines. So if a factory is producing artillery and you all of a sudden wanted to produce rifles, it's going to take it some time before it can do that effectively. Finally, one of the last and most useful tabs is the recruit and deploy tab. This is where your military units are, your infantry, your cavalry, your tanks, all that good stuff is here. On the left side of the screen here, you have your current templates. The templates are what is used by your troops in the field. If I was to change something in this template, like let's say adding support anti-air, that would be changed for every division that I have in the field that uses this template. And the same thing can be said for these other ones as well. Again, changing templates use Army experience like we talked about before, and recruiting division types will need different equipment, and it will also need manpower. On top of course, a bit of training time. Once a division is ready, you can click this little button next to it to deploy it somewhere specific in the field. You can click this one by choosing where you want it. Okay. So we've been through a lot so far. I've showed you how Frontlines work. I've showed you how to use them in action. I've showed you doctrines, production environments, all this great stuff. Also, this is the only good song in Hearts of Iron 4 by default. If you want to play one, play this one. One thing we haven't talked about enough, however, is how division templates work and kind of go into detail on them. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I mentioned before, division templates are basically what all your troops use in combat, and you cannot delete these while they're being used. So if you want to delete some of these and it's a fucking mess, you have to change the templates of the whole division. Changing the template will change how many troops are in that division, what support they have, and their combat stats. We haven't talked about combat stats yet, so let's go ahead and do that. It's an obvious thing that all divisions are different. Infantry works in different environments, and so forth and so forth. So does like mountain infantry, like this is, cavalry, armor regiments, all this good stuff. It's important to keep a look on the combat stats of each division. Notably, one of the most important things you want to look at is soft attack and hard attack. I'm not going to go through all these because they're kind of obvious, but hard attack and soft attack is pretty much exactly what you think. Soft attack is soft attack against other soft targets. Hard attack is hard attack against other soft targets. So having high soft attack is very important against a target that is soft, like infantry, and having high hard attack is important against some kind of a unit that is hard, like armor. And having a combination of those two in, say, infantry is also a good idea. So if you can combine your infantry with armored cars or something like that, and that's usually a pretty good combination. Do mind the defense as well, or the defense of each unit, their speed, their organization, recovery rate, all this stuff really does matter. And you need to keep an eye out on this stuff. Generally, you'll hear a lot of people talking about the width of divisions, combat width. And basically, it tells you how much room it's going to take in combat. So this unit, for instance, it says, for example, if a combat has a total of width of 80, you can fit 4 divisions with a width of 20. Whether or not you want to make 40 width divisions or 20 width is up to you. One of the metas for Hearts of Iron 4 is definitely to make quite large divisions instead of many small ones. If you're playing a smaller country, you're kind of going to be forced to make smaller divisions because your manpower isn't all that high. Another thing as well is the type of division that you're running with. You can make them reserve, default, or elite, and the only difference really is that they're going to be prioritized higher in equipment and upgrades. And that's basically it. I don't really think that this does a whole lot more else. This is a reserve division. I don't really think this really matters a whole lot. It's not going to change your soft attack or anything like that, but it's going to prioritize the division for reinforcements and for equipment. Now, the final and most important thing perhaps to know of in this division designer, except what I've already talked about, is that you can always make new ones. You can click this button right here in the infantry name. You can click create empty, which will make a completely empty template, and you can start working from here. And as I've said before, you do use army experience to make these templates. So if I want to make, let's say, a brand new infantry unit of some kind, or you know what, fuck that, let's make motorized infantry, like why not? And we're gonna keep on adding that. Sure, let's do that. I don't know why we'd want to, but let's do that. Medium tanks. Wow, yeah, medium tanks. You can see it's going to cost you quite a bit. So that's kind of how that works. You can also click this button to see and enable different kinds of equipment if you want to force them to use certain kinds of equipment, and so forth and so forth. So the very final thing I want to show you in the recruit and deploy section is AI. I've talked about before about how crappy the Hearts of Iron AI generally is. That goes for the frontline system and the automation, but that also counts for the in-game AI and the way the AI deals with divisions and division templates. One way to look at this is, since right now I'm playing Romania and I've managed to puppet Hungary and Bulgaria in my focus tree, I'm going to take a look at what templates they're running to have an idea what troops they're fielding in battle. So let's go ahead and click here. And this menu will only pop up if you have puppets, mind you. And you can see Hungary, for instance, does have quite a bit. This isn't actually that bad. Typically, you'll see the AI can have 50 to 100 different templates. And they're all going to be these really strange variations of division templates. The AI does this to try and be as efficient as possible with the resources it has. Generally, please do not make infantry like this. Make proper divisions, either large or small. Do not follow this kind of strat where you have a whole fuck ton of different templates. I'll show you one cool trick though before we move on to the next section. Is if you want to find all the divisions of a certain type in your army, like let's say I want to find everyone that has this template right here. What you could always do is just double left click them. That'll bring up all the units in that army that has that same type. Or if you have multiple armies, what you could always do is just temporarily change its icon. Let's put a star on it. Doesn't cost you anything. And I can now easily and visibly identify who in my army is of the template that I want to change. In this case, I'm not going to change it because it's an okay template. It works okay. The very last tab is your logistics tab. This is where you see how many rifles you have, how much support equipment you have, how many convoys you have. This is where you see all your logistics in your whole country. This is very simplified in comparison to something like Hearts of Iron 3. But in our case, you can see that we're missing 15,000 rifles, which is quite serious. Having a deficiency as large as this will definitely impact how effective your units are in combat. We haven't looked at the units themselves yet, but you can obviously understand that if you're missing this many rifles, your divisions and troops on the ground will not be in tip-top shape. You can affect these numbers, of course, by reducing the size of your divisions, or by getting lend-lease from a foreign nation, or conquering more land that has more military factories, or simply by importing the resources that you need. In my case, I'm missing steel and tungsten, so let's actually go ahead and fix that. I'll import some from tungsten from Portugal, and I'll import some more steel from the United States, which should hopefully improve the efficiency of my production lines and give rifles to troops that really need them. Okay, we've now looked at all these different tabs, these different resources, and all this shit. Let's actually get into what you want to see, which is how to control your army, how to invade things, and how to check the status of your troops. First and foremost, you can select a bunch of troops simply by clicking and dragging like this. I can select all the troops in my whole country. In this case, I have 31 divisions. You can see the status of your troops by looking over at the left portion of the screen, and you can hover your mouse over to see more details. In this particular instance, I have a division here which has a total fighting strength of a very low 30%. And the reason being, its reinforcement requests are 600 rifles, 8 artillery pieces, and 21 support equipment. So the equipment shortages that we touched before by looking in the logistics tab is without a doubt affecting our troops on the ground, which we need to fix ASAP. I didn't mention it before, but you can also disband troops or disband whole divisions and then send a lot of those troops and equipment back to then have it redistributed throughout your army if you're really, really down and low on supply. Next up, another thing you should take note of is the experience level of your troops. The more trained your troops are, either by in combat or by just exercising, will directly affect what kind of modifiers they have in combat. Your regular trained troops have a plus 25% modifier in combat. Your trained have a 0% modifier, and your fresh, which we don't have any of here, have a negative 25% modifier in any combat. So that's basically how to look at your troops in the game. There's not a whole lot more to it. It's pretty simple. You can click different kinds of things here, like strategically remobilize, which is exactly what you think it is. That means transporting a troop from A to B a little bit faster. Also, if you want to look at more details with a certain division, you can just click on it like this, I can see that they're 9,000 men. They're 30% supplied, and you can see specifically what kind of equipment they have and how many they have of each piece, along with all their combat stats in different environments. So, moving on. One thing I want to spend some time talking about is armies and front lines in Hearts of Iron 4. If you've ever played Hearts of Iron 3 or looked at my previous tutorial, you'll know that this is an area where I think Hearts of Iron 4 is a bit of a mess, but I'll just show you how this all kind of works, and we'll talk about it from there. So what's nice about Hearts of Iron 4, and also its greatest downside, is that it is very simplified. So if you want to organize your whole army, what you basically do is, in my case, I've highlighted all the divisions that I have, and I'm just going to click this portrait down here, and I've now stuffed all my troops into one massive single army. You've got your armies, your army groups, and different kinds of leaders as well. The highest chain of command is Army Group? Yeah, it's Army Group. The highest chain of command is Army Group. And a single army will typically only be able to have up to 24 troops under a certain general. Generals are chosen by clicking the army and then clicking this portrait up here. A list will pop up giving you a pretty detailed overview of different generals that you have. Generals do directly affect your troops on the ground, so choose what general you want for that specific army with some care. For example, if I'm going to be fighting a defensive war, in this case, let's say against the Soviet Union, I'm going to choose a general that has a higher defense skill than, for example, this guy down here. There are also different ranks. Field marshals typically command army groups, and generals typically command armies. So in my instance, I'm going to use this guy here, whatever his name is, to command my troops, and then I'm going to assign one of my field marshals. In this case, going to be Petra. He's got a couple of awards as well. He's got a trait. Let's go ahead and give him one of these ones. We actually did talk about command power before, and you can see I can spend command power in this image here and give him different kinds of special abilities like higher reinforcement rate or higher division recovery rate. So now that we've done that, you can see that this army right here has pretty much just way too many troops in it. He's currently commanding almost 300,000 troops, and that's way too many for a single army. So if you hover your mouse over it, you can see it says, leading too many units, all stats reduced by 29.1%, which is a very, very serious debuff. So you're going to want to organize these troops a little bit better and make sure there are no more than, in this case, 24 divisions in a single army. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and click a bunch of these troops, and using Shift and first clicking, I'm going to choose a bunch of divisions. These guys here, for example. I'm going to click the portrait button to put them in an army by themselves, and right away you can see that the penalty has been removed from my original army. I now have a secondary army called Army 2 with their own color code, as you can visibly see on the map, and I'm going to assign a general of their own. If I want to put this army into this army group, I can do so very easily by just kind of dragging it over to the left. And the reason you might want to do that is that you can issue commands to your whole army very, very easily in Hearts of Iron 4. This is also one of its greatest downsides, but let's move on from that. If I wanted to assign orders to this whole country, basically, or all these troops, I could do so simply by clicking my army group here, and under the battle plan section, I could click front line. I'll left click on that, and it'll show me where I can put down different front lines. The front line system is very jittery, it's very buggy and glitchy sometimes, and it's generally kind of a mess, so you can't really just let go when you create these, but it is a way to easily organize your troops. So let's say in our case, we're going to want to place all of our troops against Hungary. So I'm going to hover my mouse over the border, and I'm going to left click. Now, nothing's happened yet, but automatically you can see that under or above the blue line, it says 23 divisions, Army 1, which is this army and all these troops that are currently marked. And below it, there is a purple line that says 31 divisions, Army Group 1, which is every single troop in the whole army. And it's also actually put 8 of our divisions up north with Army Group 2, which are all these guys. And if I was to click play on the timer, the AI is automatically going to distribute the orders to all these divisions, and they're going to start moving. So let's do that. And you can see they're strategically remobilizing, and they're going to move to the border to do whatever that it is we want to do. An excellent topic switcher is the event that just popped up. Hearts of Iron 4 has a lot of these events, and these will enable you to twist your country in what direction you want. For example, now that we're playing Romania, we're going to have all kinds of crazy events linked to our current king, who's a bit of a dumbass. So if I choose this box, I will have to spend more civilian factories on consumer goods. If I click this box, I will lose 90 political power, which is bad. But I'll only have to spend 3% more consumer goods on factories for a total of 90 days. So we'll choose that since it is subjectively the least serious of these two options. Anyways, moving on from that, you can see my troops are now all moving. And for the next step in our grand battle plan here, I want to create an invasion order on Hungary. And that is done pretty easily when I've created an army group like this. I can simply left click on it, click the offensive line, and then by holding the right mouse button and dragging, I can create an invasion order completely automatically without a lot of fuzz. Now, like I said before, mind you, these frontline orders will sometimes not work very well, and the AI is very, very buggy, so you're going to want to supervise this pretty closely, but it is a lot easier than something in Hearts of Iron 3 where you are micromanaging everything. And speaking of micromanaging, if you feel more comfortable with micromanaging, which I personally do at times, you can do that yourself. So in my case, I actually don't want this army right here to be assigned to this frontline order. In fact, I'm going to drag them off the whole order. And now I could, for example, micromanage these divisions here if I wanted to, and I could let the AI manage this army group and this army over here all by themselves. Okay, so you now know some of the basics of moving troops around, troop status, and the basics of army groups and generals. There is a lot more detail here, and I recommend that you spend some time looking at some of these modifiers. For example, terrain modifiers. In our instance right now, we've got troops moving through the mountains of Transylvania, so our troops are going to have a quite serious attrition deficit. In this case, it's up to 40% because we're moving in mountains and we're poorly supplied. Keeping an eye on these kinds of modifiers is very important in Hearts of Iron 4, and I highly suggest you spend some time here. Of course, assigning frontlines and invasion orders are far from the only orders you can issue to your armies. You can start exercises, which I mentioned before will give you army experience. You can choose what speed battle plans are executed at. So if I want this invasion order to happen very quick and very aggressively, I can choose aggressively execute battle plans. You can make naval invasion orders and paratroop orders, which we'll talk a lot more about later because it is a little bit complicated. Our front lines we already looked at. Offensive lines we already looked at. You can also make spearheads. I don't personally use these an awful lot, but they'll basically try to aggressively, as it says, aggressively take all provinces. They were there when the order was first painted without adjusting to changes. After that, you have your fallback line, which is where troops will automatically fall back to if they start to lose a certain province. You've got your area defense, which is very useful if, for example, I want to defend my country right now, and I want to have some troops passively just sitting around, I can click the area defense, and I can choose what I want them to monitor, and I can just left-click provinces like this. It's quite a convenient tool if you're, let's say, the Union and you've conquered a bunch of land where there's a rebel risk. You can use this tool to just station some troops around and make sure, for example, there are no naval invasions or that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and click play and see what happens. You can see my troops are finding areas that are vulnerable and they're traveling out to them. Okay, so with that being said, I think I've shown you guys the very basics of kind of how to manage troops via the automatic system here. Next I want to briefly touch on is, of course, you can delete orders with this kind of trash bin down here. And you can move units manually just like in every other Hearts of Iron game, basically by just selecting the unit that you want to move and right-clicking where you want it to move as well. Another nice thing to know is that you can also queue movement. So by default, a unit will choose the quickest path. So let's say I want this troop right here, or this division, to move to Bucharest. It will choose the most default route, or rather the most efficient route, and it'll start walking it. Let's say that there is a big hostile mean division in this town here and I want to avoid it. I can always hold shift and right click to queue where I want my unit to move. Very basic little thing, but it's it's a useful tool for a whole lot of different things. Like I said, moving past units, retreating, and different kinds of things like that. Another quick little detail to notice is that some of my units now have this little shield next to their name, which means that they're now entrenched, and that will give them, as you can see, a 14% defensive combat bonus. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. In Hearts of Iron 4, you can see a lot of things just by hovering your mouse around, like, what is this? Okay, in this case, we can't see what it is, but if we want to see what is in this town, we can see how many divisions are in it, or how many brigades. You can see the victory points this has, the weather, what state it belongs to. I can see more detailed about what resource types I have, my manpower, where it's coming from, where my manpower is. For example, I have 250,000 men in the Army, 1,000 in the Air Force, and 1,000 in the Navy. That kind of thing. Hover your mouse over things if you're trying to look for details. It's a very useful tool. Your mouse, obviously, you can see what's going on everywhere. So, with that out of the way, we've touched on some of the basics. I'm now going to play Hearts of Iron 4 a little bit, skip the time a little bit forward for you guys, so I can show you how battle plans work in practice and how to move troops around in practice, so you guys know a little bit more about what's going on. So when I mentioned earlier the Diplomacy tab is not all that useful, what I really mean is this list right here. What is, however, very, very useful is this menu right here. Now, I've obviously shown you the details section and how this all works, but let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this all in detail. The Diplomacy tab, or this window right here, the country-to-country interaction, is in fact the way that you interact with all other states in Hearts of Iron 4. And more specifically, I want to go into national spirits because we haven't talked about those. And then I want to talk a little bit about justification of war and finally factions. So national spirits are basically effects that they affect your nation. Sometimes they're unique, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and sometimes they don't do a whole lot at all. Like the anti-Soviet pact just increases the relation to Germany and decreases it for the Soviet Union. Other than that, in the Diplomacy tab, you can obviously, like I said, justify war. And justifying war in Hearts of Iron 4 works in one of 2 or 3 ways, basically. You can justify war manually on someone if the world tension is high enough and if you have the right government type. If you are playing a democracy, you cannot justify war on someone who has not created world tension and is also a democracy. If you're playing a non-aligned country, such as myself, the world tension has to be a little bit higher than if you're playing a communist or a fascist state. The second way to go about doing war is you can get a war goal through your focus tree. So in some cases, you might play a country that has a focus that will just straight up give you a war goal for free. Other than that, you can always get called into a war against someone if you're in a faction, for example, Or you could always have guaranteed the independence of someone, and someone else could declare war on those, and then you'd eventually get called into that war as well. You could always reject these, but typically you wouldn't do so. Other than that, in this tab, you can also go ahead and create factions. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And making factions is done typically by two countries that have the same government type. It is quite hard for, let's say, a communist state and a fascist state to create some kind of faction together. It is workable, but it can be a little bit tricky at times. Other than that, this tab is also used for getting access rights and that kind of thing. You can see, because of my relation to Germany and their relation to me, they're never going to give me any access rights. While a country like Italy seemed to like me quite a lot, I already have access rights, and I could actually join their faction. Their faction right now, which is the Allies, and the Allies is in this game, interestingly enough, fascist. You can also spend political power to improve your relation to other countries. You can send attachés, which will I think that gives your general a few boosts, and it helps them out a little bit as well. And you can also see all of their battles without being in a faction with them. Other than that, you can make non-aggression pacts. You can also start lend-lease from this menu as well, which will give some of your equipment to someone else. Typically, the prerequisites are that they're in some kind of a war. So if you look over at China here, we can see I'm already giving them a little bit of equipment, I believe. Yeah, I'm already giving them a little bit of equipment, so we can't do it right now anyways. Other than that, in the diplomacy tab, in the country interaction, you can also request things like expeditionary forces, which is like sending them aid, or they can basically send you troops if you're in a war and they are not. You can also go ahead and request licensed production, so if they have some kind of technology type that you don't have, you can pretty much sell some of your civilian factories, and in return you'll get some technology type that you don't have. Finally, one of the more interesting things you can also do in the diplomacy tab in the country-to-country interaction is boosting party popularity. Typically what you can do with this once it's become high enough is you can actually stage a coup in their nation, which will typically spark a civil war. So if I was to do this against Germany over a prolonged period of time and they don't do anything about it, I could after a while try and stage a coup, and then that would start some kind of civil war within Germany. And all this is done in the diplomacy tab, but like I said, this country list, I don't find this to be very useful, but the country-to-country interaction in diplomacy is of course extremely useful. This is how you declare war, this is how you make factions, this is how you do things against other states in Hearts of Iron 4. Okay, another sidetrack topic that I want to jump to really fast is a unique one for Hearts of Iron 4, and it is world tension. I forgot to talk about it when I was doing the menus here and focus trees and all that. This is highly connected to that though, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Sorry for jumping a little bit back and forth. Anyways, the world tension is a mechanic that pretty much makes it so that countries can't jump to war immediately when the game starts. The world tension slowly creeps up, and by the time it reaches 50%, certain countries can start doing certain things, and at 100%, it's pretty much free for all. That means that, let's say a democracy, for example, like Sweden, they will pretty much never be able to attack another democracy like Norway. A democracy like Sweden, however, can attack a communist country like the Soviet Union at a certain percent world tension. I believe it might be 75% for a democracy versus a communist state. A fascist country might only need 5% world tension to be able to invade and declare war. And again, the higher the world tension is, the crazier things are going to get, the more or the less constraints countries have in what they can and cannot do. So for our instance with Romania right here, I'd love to be able to invade Bulgaria right now. If we click on their flag, we will be thrown into this menu right here. And you can see I'd have to click on Justify War to be able to go to war. And it says we need world tension at 50%. And it is 50% because Romania right now is currently a non-aligned state. That means we are royalist. We have a king because I've chosen that path in the focus tree. Another important thing to note while in this tab is this is obviously where a lot of the interaction between countries happen. You can see how many divisions a country has by clicking this little tab up here, which is extremely useful. So in my case, I can see that Bulgaria has between 7 and 18 divisions, and this number will increase based on how much intel or rather decryption I have on them. I can also see their factory count, their naval forces, which is the number of ships, dockyards, airplanes, civilian factories, convoys, and total manpower. You can also see those numbers for your own state if you want that. Okay, so unfortunately we've had some data corruption and we lost a part of the tutorial where I talked about the Air Force, so we're going to do that one over again. The most important thing to know when dealing with the Air Force is that the Air Force is, unlike Hearts of Iron 3, a massive contributor to how well your war is going to go. Having aerial supremacy or aerial superiority is a massive, massive helper. You can actually see how combat changes when you, for example, have aerial superiority. And the way you make aircraft, I've already gone through it in the production section, but again, it's just this little button right here, and you produce aircraft just like you do guns and everything else. They will then appear once you click on an airfield. You can click Add New Air Wing, and you can add them in just like this. I don't have any manpower right now, so we're not going to be able to do that. But that's how you add them in. They have experience just like normal ground units do, as do your Navy. We're going to talk about the Navy after this. So the way you control your Air Force is that you can either choose to operate them completely independently by clicking these buttons up here, and depending on what type of fighter or bomber you have, they can do different things. So I, as Romania, I've decided to only have fighters. So I've taken all my fighters and I've put them on aerial superiority. So we're going to do that. They're not going to try and help us getting aerial superiority over Ukraine, because we're fighting alongside the Germans to take out the Soviet Union, which is going very, very well, actually. What you can also do is go ahead and attach your Air Force to your armies, and that can be done by highlighting them like this, and then clicking these buttons above your armies. That will attach them to it and make sure that they're supporting that army in particular. You can split them up as well, as you could have these 5 on this army, you can have these ones on that one, and so forth. A couple interesting things with the Air Force, or your Air Force altogether, is that you can use it to get naval supremacy as well, by having strategic bombers, naval bombers, and fighters together. All in all, that can give you naval supremacy. So you can, for example, naval invade. We'll get back to naval invasions a little bit later, though. Another thing you need to be able to look at while controlling your Air Force is how effective your mission is. So in my instance right here, I've got all my fighters. I've clicked Ukraine because that's where I want my supremacy to be going down, or superiority. Let's go ahead and start the timer real fast, and let's see if this is going to change at all. Yep, it's going to be increasing. Ooh, look at that, not bad. 50%. Ooh, damn. 50% air superiority. That's good. That's more than half. So let's go ahead and try and push a little bit here. Let's just see how that works out for us. Probably not going to go all that well, but we got the Germans kind of alongside us. I'm on extensive already. Oof, Jesus. Uh-oh. That's not good. Let's go ahead and grab... see if we can't recruit some more troops. Oh, well, keep the timer paused for right now. When you win or lose certain battles, either with your Air Force or your Navy, you're going to have these little event boxes pop up, especially if it's over a naval region. You're not going to get notifications if your fighters get shot down or you lose personnel by them being shot down. All you'll get is the number up top will be different from the number below in this status bar here. So if one of my fighters would be shot down, it would say that the group is supposed to consist of, for example, let's say the bottom number is 24 and the top number is 20. That means that I'm missing 4 fighters. And that will then, in turn, show up in the production tab as reinforcement need 1. Just the same as it does with equipment, pretty much. Controlling the Air Force is very, very simple. And I talked about it before as well, but you need to choose the right Air Force for you. Choosing fighters, bombers, whatever it is, you have to prioritize a little bit. So let's talk briefly more about the controls of the Air Force. There's a couple other things you might need to know. You can always merge different air wings together. You should always, though, try to keep the same types separate. So this right here is the IAR-12. This is 80. So you wouldn't want to combine these two because the 80 might have longer range. We can check. Yep, you can see it has quite a good range actually in comparison to this one. So combining those two would really mess up the range. So we can grab two of them by holding left shift and then left clicking. And then I can press the merge air wings button. That's going to combine them into one single unit. I've already showed you how deploying new air wings work. You can set their replacement priority up here. Not really used that too much in my 1,000 hour gameplay experience, to be honest. You can reorganize them as well, split out new units, split them in half, and that kind of thing. And I think other than that, there's not a whole lot more to it. This button up here lets you control if they're gonna fly during daytime or only during nighttime. Your Air Force is also obviously controlled by our Air Force commander. You'll have a chief of the Air Force, and he'll give you stats and bonuses just like your Army commanders do. For example, our guy here, he'll give me strategic bombing advantage, which for me isn't very useful at all because we have none of those. But this is where you get a lot of effects from. And running, for example, running missions during nighttime is a whole lot more risky. The chance for accidents are a lot higher during nighttime than it is during daytime. Note as well that sometimes if your hostile has a massive air force, it might not help out all that much to try and do aerial supremacy with them. You might just keep them reserved and stationed on the ground for something else. Another thing to note is that if you do get a very large air force, like let's say you're playing the Soviet Union, you're going to want to make sure that your airfield is large enough. If you have too many planes on an airfield, the mission will start becoming incredibly inefficient. So in this case, you can see the efficiency is 58%, which is really good, or quite good. Let's say the airfield could only take 50 fighters. You'd get a pretty severe debuff from having too small of an airfield. That's only really a problem if you're a major country that has a lot of fighters and stuff. That's not a problem for Romania, but that's something you're gonna want to make sure that you just stay on top of. Obviously, you can always build more airfields just by going to your construction tab like we talked about, clicking airbase, and then upgrading it in the regions where you want it to be upgraded. Your air bases can also be captured by hostile forces, so your fighters won't be captured, they'll always fly away, but you're going to want to make sure that you, either way, probably move them before they get captured. So let's say that my front here starts going bad and I'm losing troops all of a sudden. I'd want to make sure that these fighters could rebase somewhere else. I do believe that if you have nowhere else that your fighters can land, no more airfields, then they will get actually captured. They might return to your pool of available craft. I'm not 100% sure. I do not think they actually do. Okay, our next topic is going to be dealing with the Air Force and the Navy. I've already showed you how the Air Force works in practice. You can set them to aerial supremacy, close quarter, or kind of supporting units on the ground. Where the fuck is my Air Force anyway? And the good thing is, here's a key point. You can click these map modes to figure out where your Air Force is. In my case, it's down here in Greece. Great. So you have it here. You already know you can put it different settings depending on where they are. You can rebase them by right-clicking on your airfields. And you can click this little icon here to deploy new air wings from your reserve. And the next thing I want to show you guys, other than the map modes down in the lower right corner, this is a great way to locate where your different things are at, is the Navy. We haven't talked about the Navy too much yet, so let's go ahead and do that. A lot of the same things can be said for the Navy that can be said for the Air Force. They have limited range, limited fuel, they use fuel. Commanders work pretty much in the same way, except the Air Force doesn't actually have, or commanders in the Navy work in kind of the same way they do in the Army, except the Air Force, they don't have any commanders, pretty much. For the Navy to be optimal, you have to have two different kinds of a force, a scouting force and a destroying type force, like I've said. And one thing you're going to take note of while using the Navy is that it can be a little bit tricky to control. I've always found it to be a little bit annoying to deal with, but this menu right here is how you control your whole army. You can do naval exercises, which will again give you Navy experience. You can do convoy raiding to hit enemy supply ships, enemy convoys, and try and sink them to deny your enemy of supplies. All that stuff can be done by using your Navy. Now, one thing you're going to hear people talk about a lot is naval invasions in Hearts of Iron 4. You need to know how to do them. And basically, there are two ways to do naval invasions in Hearts of Iron 4. And when I mean naval invasions, I mean taking troops, like let's say this division here, and navally invading from, let's say, this port right down here in Greece, and landing them in hostile territory and attacking whatever, if anything, is in this port over here in Dalmatia. And the way you can naval invade is either by having aerial supremacy or naval supremacy. And note that if I'm going to invade from, let's say, a different region, let's say I'm going to be invading from over here in Romania, and I'm going to land troops over here, like I said, in Yugoslavia. There are two things you need to know about. The first thing is you'll need to have naval supremacy the whole way along access routes as well, or you need to be able to pass them. So again, like I've said before, hovering your mouse does a lot of things for you in Hearts of Iron 4. Hovering your mouse over things. So this is the strait near Istanbul. You can see armies cannot pass, navies cannot pass, and submarines cannot pass. So my navy over here is sadly pretty much blocked to the Black Sea. It can't get anywhere. The only way to get something over here is pretty much by creating a new navy. You can't force these back into your pool somehow. You're going to have to delete them completely and remake them all together, which is kind of a silly mechanic, but that is how that works. So if you're going to be naval invading from this province or this region over to this region, or let's say something as stupid as just from this port to this port, you'll need naval supremacy or aerial supremacy or both in both of these massive provinces. So do keep that in mind. It can be frustrating to not find out why your naval invasion isn't working simply because you don't have naval supremacy in that area. And naval supremacy or aerial supremacy can be really hard to achieve if you're a small country, for example. So you need to kind of know how to work your way around it. Either by, you can always transport your armies from A to B without having naval supremacy. So let's see if I can show you this really fast. Let's say I don't have naval supremacy in this port over here. I can always move these by right-clicking the port itself. I'm now not navally invading. I'm using a normal transport. You can always do that. There is a chance they will get attacked, and if you do get attacked while doing this, you're very, very vulnerable because your troop is basically on a convoy ship, and if it does get hit with a torpedo or something while at sea, you're going to lose that whole division. But that is one way to move troops around. Right, you can't actually cancel this, so I'll just have to do it now. But let me actually show you how naval invading something in practice would work. So I'm in the process right now of trying to invade Yugoslavia, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's been a few days actually now since I made the first part of the tutorial. Yeah, we can go ahead and do this focus, which lets us divide Yugoslavia. All right, now I'm doing another focus. What am I doing? All right, I'm doing these airfields, or these oil fields. Let's go ahead and choose this focus to divide Yugoslavia. We're going to set up a couple of troops to naval invade. And one thing I didn't mention with naval invasions is that the more troops are going to naval invade, the more convoys you will need, and the more preparation time you will need. This is, for someone like me, who's like kind of old school that played Hearts of Iron 3, I think this is a very weird mechanic, but whatever, I'm not going to get into that here. So, if you want to land, let's say you want to land 10 divisions, quite a large number actually. Let's say I want these guys here. This is 10 divisions. I'm going to put these on my field marshal. I don't know why I'd want to do that, but let's do it. I'm going to click the naval invasion order, and I'm going to naval invade from this port in Greece, and I want them to land, like I said, over here in Yugoslavia. So to start off with, I'm going to assign them to this order because right now it says no divisions. First and foremost, click my whole army. I'm going to hold Control and left shift over it. And what you can see right now, it says naval invasion capacity exceeded. Research more transport technology to increase your naval invasion capacity. So in my instance, I haven't researched the technology yet, and I can't do it altogether. I'll have to simply wait and go ahead and research it. So let's go ahead and do that and come back to it when it's ready. Another thing to take note of while we're researching is the fact that we're now trying to naval invade with a normal infantry. And obviously normal infantry isn't an optimal thing to invade with. So in your research, you can also go ahead and unlock Marines, which will be far, far more efficient to do naval invasions with. I believe they are also faster. But normal infantry will suffer a huge penalty when they are naval invading a port and there is actually a hostile force there. In fact, that penalty sometimes is so large you'll just straight up lose. So if you're actually going to be naval invading a whole lot, I do recommend you go ahead and go for some Marines. If you're struggling with your naval or your special forces cap, you can always research a bit more to increase your cap, or to assign a special general or something that would give you a little bit more Marines. At least put 1 or 2 Marines in the naval invasion because they're just so much more efficient than just using regular infantry. Okay, so we finally have the naval invasion tech researched. We can actually now go ahead and click our little army here, and I'm going to hold my left control and I'm going to left click this order. You can see now there's 10 divisions assigned to this order, and by hovering my mouse over this little commence button here, the same ones that are used for activating frontline orders are used for naval invasions. You can left click that one to commence the order. But right now you can see it says reserved convoys 0 out of 30, so it's going to need some of our convoys. That's fine. The timer is currently paused. We're lacking naval supremacy in the Adriatic Sea. We have 0% naval supremacy, but require 50%, which will then require me to most likely deploy some of my ships down here. In this case, we can't actually do that. So let's go ahead and deploy some of our ships in another part of the country. Let's go ahead and see if we can't deploy it down south somewhere. Bessarabia, Theater 1. So what we actually found out right away is that because of the fact that all of our naval factories are up here, we cannot actually deploy anything down south, even though we control Greece, which is very interesting. We could always beg Turkey. Do you want to be friends with me? Want to give me military access? No, we're never going to do that. Okay, so the only option we have to actually do this naval invasion order is to get air supremacy over that area. And we can actually try and do that. Let's go ahead and deploy some of our Air Force down south, the larger bulk of it. We're going to leave that behind and send only the smaller bulk. And while we're doing this, we're actually in the process of invading Romania, so we're going to use a bunch of the different stuff that we've learned so far. There's only really one topic that we're missing right now, and it is paratroopers, which work in the exact same way, more or less, as the naval invasions, except you can obviously paradrop anywhere you want into a country as long as the distance is there, but you do specifically need paratroopers. I don't think you can use normal infantry. I'll put that up on the screen if you can or not, but I'm pretty sure you have to use paratroopers. You cannot just smack down normal infantry. So then let's go ahead and get some real supremacy in the Adriatic Sea, and then hopefully with some due time that will give us supremacy that we need. It says 0. Let's go ahead and see if we can't change that somehow. Okay, so we're just about ready to start invading Romania and using the things that we've learned so far in the tutorial. It does, however, seem that as Romania doesn't have enough fighters, I can't actually get air supremacy because Yugoslavia does have more fighters than I do. So most likely our naval invasion plan here is going to be scrapped. As a matter of fact, I think we might as well just remove navigate our troops around a little bit and use them on the ground instead. So let's go ahead and do that. But if we did have some ships here, we could always just put those out for convoy raiding or patrolling, whatever else. We would get naval supremacy and we could send them out. Final thing I want to say about the naval invasions is that you have to land in a port. You can't just land in a random location that you want. For example, this province right here, you can't land there. You'll have to land in the port town next to it. And you're also very exposed when you're doing naval invasions. If you do actually land and you get split off away from the town where you've landed, there is quite a chance that your unit's going to be surrounded and destroyed because you are absolutely dependent on keeping that port. But I think with that, we're pretty much done with some of the key topics here. We're going to have a few after as well. But let's go ahead and use what we've learned so far with justifying war, with just front lines and everything else. And let's go ahead and invade Yugoslavia in this instance. And we're going to see how this works out. And try and pay attention to what I'm doing. We haven't gone into everything in super detail. But just by watching me invade Romania, you'll be able to catch on to a thing or two. One thing we'll do now as well is we're going to call our puppets, both Hungary and Bulgaria, into this war. So they're now both in it. And now that that's done, I'm going to start the invasion plan with the northern armies here. I'll do the same with the south. So we're going to hit the Yugoslavians from all possible sides here, as aggressively as humanly possible. And hopefully this will be a pretty swift war. They don't have too many troops. Let's look at their troop count. We do outnumber them for troops, but they vastly outnumber us in factory count. That's for sure. Actually, not too bad, but they do have a lot more factories than we do. So let's go ahead and do that. Our original naval invasion troops are still stationed down south. They'll join later. I'm going to switch to the map mode over here. And I'm going to use these fighters for aerial supremacy up in Hungary instead. So by clicking start, we're going to see the front starting to change. Obviously, all the troops are fighting. We need to get aerial supremacy. Aerial supremacy is a massive thing. Aerial supremacy really is make or break or a war. You can literally see the difference when you deploy fighters over a given area. In my instance, like I said, we probably won't get proper naval or aerial superiority, so we're probably gonna lose that quite a bit, I believe. I'm trying to produce a little bit of fighters. Let's go ahead and deploy those. And hopefully, what I've done as well is that you, as Romania, you get a decision to kind of split Yugoslavia with. Oh, ships are acting weirdly. Are they pulling back? See, this is what I mean with the frontline orders. You can split Yugoslavia with the Germans. So I've tried doing that. Oop. God, I almost fell off my chair there. Holy shit. So we're gonna... Oh my god, we're spearheading really hard into the country here. Let's grab the capital before they can take it out. Before they can send troops in. They reinforced it just in the last minute. But you can see a lot what I've said before, where the AI is not that smart. It will make some strange decisions in where to attack, where not to attack. Sometimes it'll hold back for an unnecessary amount of time. Sometimes it'll just keep on attacking without ever stopping. One little trick, if you've come this far in the tutorial, I'll teach you one little trick. This is not a secret or anything. Most people that play Hearts of Iron know this one. If you're ever... I'm trying the fucking music. God. If you're ever stuck... Let me pause the counter for a sec. Zoom out. If you're ever stuck somewhere, like let's say that I'm trying to continuously push the capital Belgrade, which we've now captured, but let's say we were trying to continually push that and we were just never winning. We're just grinding on it and losing troops like there ain't no tomorrow. A very known Hearts of Iron 4 trick is to actually pull back and let the AI push their numbers thin, and then you counterattack them. Because sometimes you just cannot pierce certain divisions. Maybe they have some hard units, you know, some armor, some tanks that you can't pierce when they've got units on top of it. So sometimes go ahead and try and retreat carefully. And maybe you can either do a surround maneuver, which kind of looks like we can do right here, actually, if we're able to cut this off. So that's a hot tip. Try out just kind of backing out a little bit and seeing if they don't split up. You can see we got a nice little surround going on over here. And these troops right here are all going to die. Or not necessarily die. They'll be prisoners of war, but they'll be casualties for the Yugoslavians anyway, and they won't be able to recreate those divisions. All the equipment and all the manpower is permanently lost, and they will not get it back anytime soon. So let's watch that boom disappear. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and look at how we're doing with aerial stuff here. So for right now, it looks like we're running aerial supremacy. We're not losing any fighters, which is interesting as well. Oh. I don't know why that is. Air superiority, mission efficiency, 46.5%. Not that great, but we're fighting it at least, which is good. Let's put these guys up as well. Try and mess around with those Yugoslavian fighters. Yugoslavia does have a surprisingly large air force at this stage in the game, which I thought was weird. So down in the south here, we've got an instance of where pushing just does not help. We could always try and pull back out here, but because there's a mountain province on each side, I don't think it's going to do as much. We were able to push here, actually, which is great. Oh. Another hot trick is that you can always remove these notifications by right-clicking on them. And if I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. They want to give me 1,200 rifles. It's actually a good deal, but if you accept those trade deals from your puppets, their standing will increase over time. Like they could go from a puppet to being, I believe it's there's some other form of puppet that's not exactly puppet. Can't remember the naming scheme of it. But you should, as the master, never accept deals from your subordinate countries, your puppets. Don't do that. What you want to do, your goal is pretty much to integrate countries fully with your own country. And to do that, try and build stuff in their territory that'll over time decrease their independence. We've got the Romanian oil fields, very good. Let's see what else we got in our focus tree here. I want to go for Black Sea dominance. I'll focus on getting me some heavier ships and stuff. Why do I have more building capacity? I don't. It's just showing me new units available, I believe. There you go. Let's check out. We need some more rubber. We're definitely going to trade for that. Having the right resources really make you a whole lot more efficient when you're trying to produce things. Let's take a look here as well. More propaganda. Let's take off or disable all these notifications. They're not very interesting. Oh. There you go. Okay. So, looks like we're able to... I'm going to try and do a pin surround maneuver here. If we can. Again, I'm doing this manually by holding shift and right clicking. This is not the AI doing. I'm doing this myself because I'm seeing an opportunity here to surround them. AI does actually move troops. Oh, troops as well. Okay, that's good. Do not count on the AI doing that, mind you. The AI will, well, very often not work very well. And one thing to keep an eye on while doing invasions like these is making sure the front line is still intact. If there's a gap like there is now, the AI doesn't understand that it needs to move troops here. So if this is a smart player, they could push out right here and keep pushing into my country and grab my capital or something, because I have no troops guarding me over here. Luckily, we're playing against an AI, so they're not that smart. But this is why you need to be wary when using these frontline systems. I'm having to move troops manually up here. And what you're going to see happening now is, because everything is managed by the AI and the frontline system, once I've moved this troop up here, the AI will try to move it somewhere else because it doesn't understand why I want to keep a unit here. Let's watch and see if that actually happens. Most likely, it will try and move this unit somewhere else. As you can see, it immediately diverted it somewhere else because the AI can't quite logically see why I'd want to have something here. You can try and extend the front line. There you go. Instead. So now the AI will keep pushing in that area as well. Oh, there we go. Got a little surround. Bunch of surrounded troops. That's very nice. I'm going to force attack. Keep them pinned. realistically, this is a situation where you basically will never lose, just because how surrounded they are and how much better our troops are in comparison to Yugoslavia's. Obviously, you can still fuck it up, and you can be unlucky. So, let's say if Germany was to all of a sudden invade us, we'd be in a pretty rough spot. We're getting a lot of factories available now, simply from capturing some areas in Yugoslavia, which is very, very nice. This is a conquer war goal as well, so we should be able to just take them out completely. Resisting here though, which is not bad. We got some almost ready trained armor divisions. You can always deploy divisions without them being fully trained, but we're gonna not. I'm gonna do that this time. Screw it. They're gonna be a little fresh, but we're gonna put them in there. Oh, they're actually all full. There we go. Let's see what else we got. What should we research here now? I've completely pretty much ignored everything and anything that has to do with Navy stuff. Could go for some basic light batteries. You will need that to create the most basic of light ships. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll have that. We can make some like light cruisers and stuff as well. Turn the speed up. Hope I mentioned it before. I'll say it again because it's always useful. Your numpad plus and minus changes the speed, so you won't have to continuously put your cursor over here and click left and right. Just go ahead and use your numpad plus and minus. It makes everything a whole lot more comfortable. So we're really squeezing the Yugoslavians pretty good. I'm surprised they haven't surrendered yet. Looks like Yugoslavia did surrender this part over here. Slovenia has a goal on that. Or it's a claim, rather. Okay. Let's go ahead and pause the game a little bit here and talk about claims and how they work. Because it's a topic I've forgotten. Let's talk about claims. So, any region can have claims on them. Some claims start by default in the game, where, let's say, an area like, I think, Karelia. Nope. Let's take a look. There were some areas, especially in my own country. Might as well use those. Okay, let's use this area here, a controversial area to this day. The area around the now Lithuanian capital Vilnius, then the Polish city of Wilno. This is a province where Lithuania holds as one of their core states. As you can see in the description, it is regarded as an integral part of your nation. What that means is that Lithuania can, on very short notice, declare war on Poland to get this part of their country back. And you're going to want to be aware of this simply because if let's say Russia suddenly gets a claim on Bessarabia, which I know they will, it's one of their focuses, they can go to war incredibly fast. I do have an option, I think, to give it to them as well if I don't want to go to war. But you're try and be wary of who has what claims. Sometimes you'll have countries like Moldova, which doesn't currently exist, but when they do, they'll get that claim. We've got Ukraine as well, doesn't exist, it's all the Soviet Union right now. Let's look in the south here. We've got Macedonia. Is it Macedonia or Macedonia? I think it's Macedonia. You'll have to excuse me. You can see the Republic of Macedonia has, this is one of their foreign claims. So does Bulgaria. I am its current state controller. But Yugoslavia is the actual owner. Once I win the war, I will become the state owner and controller. So talking about claims and regions, this is a quick side note. It'll be a short topic, but do always note what kind of environment you're dealing with, because different kinds of troops are good in different kinds of environments, and different environments will, in some cases, aid you and not aid you. So, again, left-clicking or just hovering your mouse over any given area will let you know what kind of terrain type it is. So, for example, I can see that this province over here is a plain, or plains, in the Soviet Union. And this right here is a forest. You can also visibly see it in some instances, but not always. That's a mountain, actually. Let's see. That'll be a forest. These are plains. Sometimes, not always, depending on what graphical settings you're running with. Forest will, as you can see, it'll hide you a little bit more. An attack is slightly reduced, 80% in normal plains. Moving with this costs type 1. Movement costs within this terrain type 1x. In mountains are quite notorious in Hearts of Iron 4. They do give you some pretty good defensive bonuses. So holding a mountain tile can sometimes be pretty effective. It can be incredibly hard to push mountain tiles if they're being defended with, for example, mountain infantry. In this map mode, you can also see the total manpower, or rather total population in a province. By hovering your mouse over it, you can also see the recruitable population of any given province. And obviously, if we were to look at a country such as China, you can see that they have quite large masses of people, or back then anyway. They have quite large masses of people in comparison to the rest of Europe, for example. And the reason you're going to want to know this is because capturing a certain province and making it an integral part of your country will unlock some of that population to be recruited. And again, recruitable population is manpower for your armies. Alright, let's go ahead and jump back and watch the, I think, final parts of our war with Yugoslavia, and let's hope the Soviet Union doesn't do anything funky behind our back. Let's see, they're doing socialist science. And you can see in their focus tree they do have an event to go ahead and take out Bessarabia, which is very, very scary. So we're going to want to be ready for that, and perhaps position troops out when the time comes. Once they've announced their claim on Poland, they will be able to claim something against me as well. And before too long now, we're going to have our first peace conference. I'm going to show you guys how that works in practice. You guys have vaguely, I believe, seen it in our peace deal with Greece as well. You can see our war is progressing really, really nicely. Again, here we're seeing some symptoms of the AI not really fully understanding what it's supposed to be doing. So it's got a single infantry division cut off over here, but it's not attacking it because it doesn't really understand that it doesn't need troops over here. Again, you can always modify this. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's go ahead and do that. There you go. So always make sure you're modifying your front lines and keeping them up to date. We've got quite a lot of losses in our war here. A lot more than I'd like, to be completely honest. It's going to be a setback for a while, getting back all this lost manpower. I'm surprised they haven't surrendered yet. 96%. If we take one or two more of their cities, they should go under. This city in the north might help us out. There you go. Maybe that does the trick. 98%. Nope. Yugoslavia's going to fight a while, as you can tell. They've got the last of their troops in the south here. We're still beating them pretty well, but perhaps not enough. There you go. What I did right just now is just clicking their frontline button and holding, or actually I didn't even do that. You can just click the whole division and hold right click to assign them to any given frontline order. And that's going to spread our troops out a little bit more. Got some reinforcements. We're taking quite heavy casualties, which is not good. Our logistics is a bit screwed as well. This is going to set us back for a while, this war with Yugoslavia here. Hopefully it'll be worth it, because we are taking out a lot of factories and stuff now. They're going to help us out a lot in the coming war with either the Soviet Union or, I guess, worst case scenario, Germany. Even though they look to be struggling a little bit. Okay, just to fill you guys in, what has happened essentially is what happens a lot in Hearts of Iron 4. The world tension mechanic pretty much makes it so that once you're in a war with someone and they join a faction, they can call in whoever they want into that war. So what's happened now is I'm pretty much at war with the Soviet Union. Yep, we're definitely at war with the Soviet Union, as well as being at war with Yugoslavia. So we're basically now, even though we're not in the Axis and have rejected their invitation to the Axis, we are actually kind of in the Axis anyway. We've been forced in. It's one of the, if I'm being honest, one of the most unfortunate mechanics, or one of the more important, how do you say this? Let's call it one of the more annoying parts of the world tension mechanic. It means well, it just doesn't always work very well. It's sad to say. So we're probably going to be fighting a true front war. The Soviets haven't attacked yet. Hopefully they're going to be too busy with the Germans, and we're going to have to manage our own, and hopefully we can pierce this Yugoslav line down here. Let's go out and see if we can't send some tanks to help out a little bit at least. The Yugoslavs have now centered their troops up a little bit more, which is scary. Maybe we can... No, they're defending it really well. A lot of aggression pacts. Let's accept all those. Let's get the time. We got 4 divisions there. They're all well supplied as well. Let's stop that attack that reinforced it, unfortunately. I don't know how this is continuously attacking. Okay, they're pulling out a bunch of troops here. Yeah, lots of countries being called into this war. Luckily, the only thing preventing me, or pretty much the only thing preventing me from being invaded right now, is the fact that the Soviets are in the war with Germany, and they're too preoccupied doing that on top of pretty much everyone else to really bother invading me. And I hope it stays that way, because realistically, our chance of protecting against the Soviet Union is not very high. So let's hope we can find a way to pierce Yugoslavia before that happens. Let's try and do that. They're very weak there for some reason. And try and pin them a little bit so they can't move too many troops around. Try and make some large troop attack cycles like this. We're lacking a lot of infantry equipment, although we are getting some in Lease. Okay, we're going to break them here, at least in the south. That doesn't help much, unfortunately. They are still going to be well reinforced everywhere else, and this is a port town as well, which is quite sad for us. This could be a very good opportunity to show you guys what pulling out kind of, or how that kind of works in practice. You can see now we've got another attack angle on the town of Split. Hopefully once we take that, they will actually surrender. Trying to move a lot of troops over here. Deal with that. Oh, this town is unguarded. I'm going to try and grab that from them. That's also something that happens quite frequently, is they'll move troops around, and there you go. And there we go, we won the war. Very nice. And what's happening now is, because of the fact that Yugoslavia is in the Comintern, they're not going to surrender in a peace conference style. That's only going to happen once Germany takes out Moscow and everyone in that alliance, unfortunately. So what we've basically reached here is kind of whatever. There's not a whole lot more to go around this game. This, I'll tell you guys right now. This is the sad thing with Hearts of Iron 4, because this is how games very often end. You'll have these two parts to start a war. They'll call someone in, someone else will call someone in, and all of a sudden, the world tension has already gotten so high that anyone can declare war on anyone, and everything's just kind of a big mess. And these wars typically never end in multiplayer games, and that's how most multiplayer games die, unfortunately. Once these massive wars start happening and people can't really do a whole lot, and it's just going to take a really, really long time to figure things out. And in the worst case scenario, if it's PvP you're looking at, like you're looking at two countries PvPing each other, it's also typically a mess, but that's not really part of the tutorial. I think we've just about covered the very most important parts of Hearts of Iron 4. There's lots to learn, there's lots to experience. I'll say it again, please, for the love of God, play with some mods. I'm running completely vanilla Hearts of Iron 4 now. The mods will make your experience so much better. You can do so many cool things. There are a lot of mod mechanics that I'm not going to teach you here, and there are a lot of in-depth things in Hearts of Iron 4 that I'm not going to teach you, like how different land doctrines work the best, what countries specifically to play, those kinds of details you need to look up yourself. But if you've followed the tutorial this far and you've listened to what I've said, you should have a pretty good idea on how to play Hearts of Iron 4 without any major difficulties. Okay, so this is the very last part of the tutorial. I'm going to show you guys how to do stuff in peace conferences, because I realized in the last one that I'd had, I didn't really explain things too well. So this is what happens when a whole faction or a whole country actually goes ahead and surrenders. What's important to know is that sometimes, or early in the tutorial, you saw that I had temporarily taken out Yugoslavia, and I had access to all their areas. That's just a temporary occupation. What we're looking at now is the permanent one. This is the peace deal between everyone that was on one side of the war fighting against everyone that was on the other side. So in this case, you can see how we have a certain score. This little star here means a score. So our score as Kingdom of Romania is 590. The Shanxi has a score of 2,000. And everyone else is pretty much done, which means Germany probably hasn't taken anything, to be honest. So I'm going to take some things on the behalf of Germany, some on the behalf of myself, and I'm going to show you guys how to pass turns in order to get more points. So usually if you're playing multiplayer, you'll be in a peace conference with other players. In this case, it's really just me. In this case, it is pretty much just me. So let's start off by clicking some things that we want, and the regions that you should try and take is generally the ones that are worth the most and the ones that have factories. So you can't really see the factory count just by looking on the map like this, but you'll have a pretty good idea from fighting them. So I'm going to go ahead and click End Turn. That will end my current turn. If you click Done, you will completely stop taking part in the peace conference. So never click Done, only click End Turn. So I'm going to click End Turn. And now you can see it's my turn again. No one else is actively actually taking anything here. Music is very loud. It's really annoying you can't adjust it while you're in a peace conference, but let's go ahead and keep taking stuff that we want. We're going to take all of Yugoslavia pretty much. And if you try and take too many things, as you can see, it's going to gray out the end turn button. So we're going to... There you go. Just take as much stuff as we can turn by turn. There we go. And so we've now taken out all Yugoslavia. And the thing now is, you can see there's no one else in the peace conference that is actively taking anything, which means that I can actually pass turns. And if I wanted to, I could take out all these countries. It would be ludicrous to do so. So what we're going to do is I'm going to press the pass button an awful lot. And then I'm going to click, for example, Germany's flag. And I'll take things on the behalf of Germany. So let's go ahead and click pass quite a bit here. Got to be careful not to press Done. So on the German side, I'm gonna start taking out some parts I know they're gonna want. And the reason I'm doing this isn't because I have to, but because realistically I just kind of wanted to. We're just gonna give them all of this. And you can't take too much stuff on your own because you're gonna have to put down garrisons to neutralize these countries as well. So let's just start taking them some things that I think Germany would very much like to have. Switzerland including. There you go. I think that's everything we're going to give to Germany. Let's go ahead and give the British Empire a bunch of stuff. So in this game, the British Empire, or the British has turned into an empire. They're fascist. I'm going to give them a whole bunch of stuff here in the south, and I think Italy is going to get the whole north there instead. We'll like reconnect all these little fragments that there you go. Or maybe Italy should have this chunk as well. Or would that be weird? I think that would be okay if we do this. British Empire, okay. And again, there's no reason for me to give them this. I'm just doing it because I kind of wanted to, and it looks good. I like the, I guess, the smoothness of taking everyone out this way. And let's go ahead and give this part as well to the British. Syria, that is. There we go. And I'm going to take this part, Istanbul, and this region over here for my own. So will I with Odessa and a bunch of stuff over here. You know what? I'm going to take out all of Ukraine, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe we could reform them or make them a puppet if we want to later as well. Let's pass some turns. There you go. And in this list here, you can always press these buttons and click to take these different provinces. Or you can always press take all states. That will pretty much just take all the states like this. In my case, I'm going to do some fine adjustments here and there. What I'm actually going to do as Qing China is I'm going to give Qing China all of China, really. If I can do that, I think that'd be kind of cool. Qing China is usually a little bit, well, oppressed, I suppose. Forgotten and ruined. Oh, that's a bit too much, I suppose. There you go. Passing until we have a bit more score. There we go. There we are. So that is all now Qing China. That's going to be very interesting. Let's go ahead and give Japan some things. I'm sure they're going to want this. And let's be nice and give them that. I think that's going to be it for what Japan is going to get this time around. I'm going to take the Dutch East Indies as my own, because these are incredibly valuable provinces. They have a lot of rubber and rare resources that you can't find anywhere else. So we're going to take these. Again, turn. Sometimes it can be hard to see what you've actually taken or what's left of a certain country, so using this list is kind of nice. So if I hover my mouse over here, I can see there's 2 states left, and I know those are both in Brazil, I believe. I will take out this thing for myself, though. There you go. And then for the British, they're going to get some more. Being very nice. They're going to get that little island and this one. There we go. They got a nice little chunk over there. Let's see what's left on the list. Mongolia. Let's see, who can we give Mongolia to? Not a whole lot, really. Okay, let's keep on looking what we can take. Right, so Italy should get some parts of France, I think. Maybe not that much. Maybe like that. I think that could be a pretty nice Italy, and then Germany's going to take care of the rest. I'll give the British Empire the north there, just because I kind of want to see how that works out. I think it could be kind of cool. British Empire, where you at? There you go. There you go. They're getting out of this okay. The British, they really are. Let's see what else we can do here to mess up. Slovakia, they're gonna be. Oh, they're actually over here. Okay, they do exist. Never mind. Okay. Let's see who else we can give things to. I could. Okay, we're going to try and take as much of Turkey as possible. And we're realistically not going to be able to hold a lot of these provinces for too long. I'm just going to use their factories. Same thing goes for the Caucasus Mountains over here. Just incredibly valuable provinces, so we might as well, I'm thinking. And if we want to, I can always puppet them. Not the Soviet Union, but the actual countries that exist here, like Georgia and Ukraine. A bunch of others as well. Pass a little bit more. This peace conference is a little bit strange because usually the AI will try and take things. I'm not sure why they've elected to not take anything, to be honest. It's quite something. You know what? Let's give Qing China all of Mongolia and Xinjiang as well. Here you go. That is going to be one massive China. If they take out some of these like central parts here, they're going to be a formidable power. There's rubber in Vietnam. Who should get that? You know what? Let's give Germany some things. I think they deserve a piece of the I guess the pie in Asia as well. All right, let's keep taking things as Germany. Can always puppet this later if they want to. See, it's very easy for Germany to take a lot of things because their war score is quite formidable. There we go. And then I'm going to take more stuff over here. A little bit too expensive. Come on. There you go. We'll see how this turns out once we're done. It's going to be too expensive in the long run in terms of manpower and everything else to garrison all these regions here, but it might be worth for the factories. Although Germany is getting the most dense part. I'm getting the southern parts of the Soviet Union. Also good things down here, of course. Okay, what else can we give? What's left of France? Ah, there are a bunch of smaller islands. You know, yeah, India. I think they're in the war with us. Or were they losers? No, they're in here. Okay. There you go. India does get a little bit. Yeah. India's getting something. Let's see what's left. Tahiti, Republic of Guadeloupe. Okay. Madagascar. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, let's satellite the Republic of Madagascar. Oh, no, that's Madagascar. Djibouti, where's that? I have no fucking idea. Oh, that's probably it. Was Ethiopia on our side? No, they're not. Settled the Republic of Guadeloupe. Let's give that to, like, Germany. I think they could appreciate a port all the way down here. We're going to satellite the Republic of Madagascar, so we'll have a satellite state down here. Those in Madagascar now exists as their own country. And Germany, where are you on the list again? There you are. Let's give Germany some more stuff. Doesn't France control the islands as well? They do over here. There we go. I think we're being really nice to the AI nations in here, just to make things a little bit more even, I suppose. What else can we give to Qing China? Should we just give, like, I don't know. Qing China is very, very hollow looking. Well, yeah, let's make us. What's left here? Oh god, these are like tiny islands. Where are they? I could always take the remaining states. Like tiny islands somewhere, I believe. Yep. Alright, we'll do that. I don't know where all that was, to be honest. It's kind of hard to see on the map, but okay. It was somewhere. Alright, let's see what's left. Netherlands. Kurkau, where is that? I wish I knew where that was. I'm sorry, I don't know where that is. Okay, we'll give it to, what do we give it to? Okay, I'll take it myself so we can control it later. Then there's pretty much the rest of the Soviet Union. Let's try and satellite these ones. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Oh, that is cursed. Let's not. That's fine, but why does Tenatuba pop up? No, it's over there. Okay, yeah. That'll be... How many different countries are these? Jesus Christ. These are like 2 different countries. Okay. Okay. Turkmenistan and... Alright, cool. Sure, let's do that. Let's do that. So we'll have those two now. What do their flags look like, I wonder? Here we go. This is Uzbekistan. This is Turkmenistan. That's Uzbekistan. Okay. Let's give some of it to... God, these provinces are massive. I think this province here should belong to Turkmenistan. It's Turkmenistan. Yeah. These puppets are going to be quite large. Not a formidable force or anything, but... Alright, and the rest of it, I think we are going to take on our own and eventually puppet as Russia, probably, if we can. Or the Russian Tsardom or something like that. They'll not have a lot of factories in this space here. Quite limited. Right, we already control Stalingrad, so yeah. Let's take all the states. That is one massive Romania. So now you can see there are no more demands to be made, which means that the only thing to do is press the done button, and the whole world will, or the war will have ended. Let's go ahead and do that. This might take a little while to load, because stuff's happening. And there you go. And there's a peace conference number 2 for Belgium as well. They're probably fighting on their own. Let's give that to Germany as well. Otherwise, they'll probably want to invade someone over it. Oh god, we can't do that. Okay. We only have 2 war score in this. And all the AI immediately dunned out. Oh no. Take the south, and... how much does it cost for me to take things with Germany? 114. Alright, we'll keep on passing. There you go, should do it, I think. Yep. Alright, they're all the states in the south. You know what? I think that'll be... yeah, that's definitely going to be Germany. Rwanda... yeah, Germany's going to... they're going to have this. I can tell, otherwise they'd probably brutally murder us. Make German Africa a thing again. Just like before World War I, I suppose. That should do the trick. Oh no, wait, what? Oh, I took that now. Okay, well, we got some landlocked regions in in Belgium next to Germany. Wow, that's not going to be very useful. Maybe we can satellite that. We can probably make some puppet states. Uh-oh. Everyone's very upset with me now. Uh-oh. So we are no longer at war. So that's going to do it, guys. I think I've showed you just about everything I can with Hearts of Iron 4. I hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, please smash the like button. Please subscribe. It means a fuck ton to a small content creator like myself. I'm not exactly the fucking biggest channel on YouTube, so I'd really appreciate it. And again, if you have comments or if there's some topic I didn't talk about here, post them down below and I'll answer absolutely all of them. And with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, and bye-bye.
So that was it for this video. Check out my Twitch if you like this shitty content. Goodbye, friends. Oh, and you should also subscribe.